My name is Arielle Morgan. I'm 32 years old, a wildlife photographer living in Paris, France. What I do isn't just a passion, it's my profession. My work has been published in international magazines and exhibited in prestigious galleries. I own a small but cozy apartment in Montmartre, a vintage bicycle for gliding over cobblestone streets, and a sunlit studio where I edit photos late into the night. From the outside, people might think I have it all: a dream career, a charming life in a romantic city, and a proud family standing behind me. But that last part isn't true. I walked away from my family exactly 1 year ago on Easter Sunday after making one of the hardest decisions of my life. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. This is my story. Not to accuse, not to defend. Simply to remember. 'Cause sometimes, in order to live honestly, you have to let go of the things you once believed were untouchable. It all began at a crowded family gathering at our estate on the outskirts of Paris. The villa, with its manicured garden and ivy-covered walls, had hosted many such events over the years: birthdays, anniversaries, holidays filled with carefully chosen wines and quiet judgments. I arrived early as usual, carrying a box of macarons from La Durée, my mother's favorite. Small offerings like these were my way of keeping some thread of connection alive, even as the gap between me and my family grew wider with each passing year. The atmosphere buzzed with laughter, clinking wine glasses, and the low hum of conversations about real estate, investment portfolios, and market trends. I sat quietly at the edge of the long table, listening but not engaging. This was a familiar role, present but peripheral. My presence acknowledged, but rarely invited in. Then my father, Philippe Dubois, a man whose name carried weight in the Parisian real estate world, stood and raised his glass. His voice, sharp and commanding, sliced through the chatter. It was the tone he used for press conferences and board meetings, not family dinners. "Our family has made a decision," he said, pausing for effect. "All assets, our company, shares, and properties will be handed over to Julien." The room fell into a stunned silence. My heartbeat stalled. For a moment, it felt like even the air paused. Julien, my younger brother, 2 years my junior, always charming, always agreeable. My mother, Claire, picked up where my father left off, her eyes gleaming as she smiled toward him. "Julien has been with the company for 5 years now," she said proudly. "He will carry on the legacy and take it to greater heights." No one looked at me. No one asked, "And what about Arielle?" I sat frozen, fingers clenched tightly around my water glass, as if it might anchor me to something solid. In that moment, I felt like I had been quietly erased from the family narrative, as if my chapter had ended and no one noticed. Growing up, my parents had always prided themselves on fairness. 2 birthday cakes, 2 equal piles of candy, 2 bicycles, different colors but the same model. I believed in that fairness. I believed in the idea that effort and merit would be recognized, regardless of whether I chose the boardroom or the mountains of Patagonia with my camera in hand. But everything changed when I turned 18. That was the year I began to sense the quiet shift. The expectations for Julien solidified: internships, tailored suits, golf weekends with potential investors. For me, the tone became less supportive, more dismissive, like my world, filled with wildlife and natural light, was a lovely little hobby, not a real life. My photos graced the covers of National Geographic and The Atlantic, but they were never framed in the family home. Julien's LinkedIn milestones, however, were routinely toasted with Bordeaux. That Easter gathering was not just a dinner. It was a turning point, a moment of clarity. And as I sat there, invisible in a room full of people who shared my name but not my truth, I realized something deeply painful. I was no longer part of their future. Or perhaps I never truly had been. Back then, I sat across from my father and told him I wanted to study photography, specifically wildlife photography. I had done my research, applied to several programs, and even secured a partial scholarship to an art academy in Lyon. All I needed was a small contribution from him to get started. He sat there, arms crossed, eyes cold, like I had just confessed something shameful. "I won't spend a single cent on that nonsense," he said. "If you want to chase it, figure it out on your own." That sentence shattered something in me. It wasn't just rejection, it was dismissal. A withdrawal of belief. I couldn't understand why my choice of career, something that filled me with passion and purpose, made me a disappointment in his eyes. It was as if stepping off the path he had silently paved made me a stranger. So I left home. With one battered suitcase, a few changes of clothes, and a handful of savings I'd been putting away since high school. I took part-time jobs, waiting tables, assisting in studios, translating photography manuals, whatever paid. I fought my way through tuition bills, late rent notices, and lonely nights in a cramped flat on the outskirts of Lyon. No one ever called to ask if I was okay. Meanwhile, they funded Julian's entire business degree, paid his tuition in full. When he graduated, they helped him buy his first apartment in the 7th arrondissement, a chic, sunlit place that was spoken about in family dinners like a trophy. He was the golden boy, pride of the family. And slowly I became something else. Not the rebel, not the failure, just someone conveniently excluded. No longer factored into conversations, decisions, or futures. The kind of silence that isn't aggressive, it's strategic. It rewrites your presence into a footnote. But still, I didn't abandon them. When my mother needed floral arrangements for her birthday gala, I made sure they were delivered from her favorite florist, with a handwritten note. When the family company faced a PR scandal, I anonymously submitted wildlife images to one of their partner organizations to help shift public attention. I never asked for thanks. I never asked for anything. A year ago, my father called me. It was nearly midnight. His voice trembled, not with age, but with fear. Company had suffered a major financial blow after a contract fell through. They needed 80,000 euros to stay afloat. If they couldn't cover it, the entire operation would spiral. I didn't hesitate. I suggested we draft a legal agreement, something simple just to ensure transparency. I wasn't asking for ownership, just a record. But he waved it off. "You know we'll take care of you," he said. "When your mother and I are gone, you'll have your share." And for a moment, I wanted to believe him. To believe that maybe things had changed. That maybe, even if they hadn't been proud of me, they still saw me as part of the family. So I transferred the money, 80,000 euros from my savings. The savings I had spent years building, euro by euro, sometimes by sacrificing meals, vacations, comfort. I wired it with a note, "For the family. I hope this helps." No contract, no paper trail, just trust. It was the worst mistake I ever made. Not because I lost the money, but because I let myself believe for one brief, foolish second that I still belonged. Back at that Easter gathering, when my father announced that everything, the company, the shares, the properties, would go to Julian, I could no longer stay silent. "And what about me?" I asked, my voice cutting through the room like glass breaking. The laughter, the clinking of wine glasses, the casual conversation, everything stopped. A heavy silence fell. All eyes turned to me, but no one said a word. My mother tried to smooth it over, offering a soft smile that barely concealed the discomfort behind her eyes. "But sweetheart, you already have your career, your apartment, your bicycle." "Julian has none of that." I looked straight into her eyes. My voice didn't shake. Every word landed like a blade. "That career? I built it. I left home at 18. I paid my own tuition. I earned every cent by myself. Meanwhile, you and Dad paid for everything Julian ever had, and now you're giving him everything again as if I don't exist. I am your daughter, too. Julian stepped in then, with that smug little tilt of his head and a voice dripping with entitlement. Mom's right. You shouldn't be competing with me. It's not a contest. I turned sharply to him, pointing my finger without hesitation. Shut up, Julian. You don't get to speak. Not here. Not now. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. Enough, Arielle, he barked. Julian followed the path we laid out for him. If you hadn't chosen that filthy job photographing animals, this company would have been yours. I stared at him, stunned, not because it hurt, though it did, but because he finally said it out loud. Filthy? I repeated slowly. That filthy job earned me enough to wire you 80,000 euros when your company was on the verge of collapse. If you're so disgusted by what I do, then return the money right now. His face turned crimson. He shot up from his chair, veins standing out in his neck, fists clenched. I won't give you a single cent, he shouted. I raised you. I fed you. I gave you an education. And now you go off photographing wild animals and act like we owe you something? You are a disgrace to this family. There it was. The final blow. A lifetime of being the outsider, of swallowing silence, of hoping they'd one day see me for who I am, collapsed in that moment. But I didn't cry. I stood up slowly, my voice calm, steady, almost too calm for the chaos that had just unfolded. If that's what you believe, then there's nothing left between us. Don't call me. Don't look for me. I'm done. And with that, I walked out. I didn't look back. Not once. Kept my head high, my pace even. As if I wasn't walking away from my childhood, my bloodline, my home, but towards something far more valuable. My self-respect. That night, I returned to my apartment, exhausted but strangely clear-headed. I stood under a hot shower, letting the water wash over me as if it could rinse away the ache of betrayal, the weight of being unchosen. The silence in my home felt gentle compared to the cold dismissal I'd just left behind. Later, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee in my hands, watching the city lights shimmer over Montmartre. Paris looked unchanged, as if the world hadn't tilted beneath my feet just hours earlier. But inside, something was shifting, something old breaking free. I thought back to where it all began. I was 18 when I walked out of that house with a suitcase and a camera I could barely afford. My dream of becoming a wildlife photographer was just that, a dream, distant and fragile. The early years were brutal. I worked endless shifts at a coffee shop to cover tuition. I skipped meals to buy film. I slept in a drafty room above a bakery, where the scent of bread would wake me long before the alarm ever could. Then came a Sunday afternoon I'll never forget. I had the day off and decided on a whim to take my camera to Luxembourg Gardens. I spent hours photographing birds, tiny sparrows mid-flight, ducks cutting through the still pond, pigeons huddled on iron railings. When I got home, I edited the shots and posted them to Instagram. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few likes from fellow students. But the post exploded, thousands of likes overnight. Comments poured in. People were moved by how I captured life, raw and unposed. Something clicked. So I kept going. I documented stray cats winding through Montmartre alleyways, foxes in the forests of Fontainebleau, swans along the Seine at dawn. I spent nights crouched in the underbrush, waiting for a moment worth capturing. Nature didn't rush, and neither did I. Within a year, my following on social media grew to over 2 million. I didn't pay for ads. I didn't chase trends. I just posted what I loved, and people responded. Then came the offers. National Geographic. Conservation groups from across Europe. Sponsorships. partnerships. My inbox became a revolving door of possibilities. One of them, a publishing house, asked to turn my collection into a coffee table book. Another suggested a gallery exhibit. With the first sponsorship deal, I opened a modest studio in Paris and named it Wildlens. Not just a business, but a statement. A promise to use my lens to help others fall in love with the wild, to see it not as distant or disposable, but delicate and essential. I poured everything into it, late nights, early mornings, every euro I earned. And it worked. The studio grew faster than I imagined. 4 years later, I had 5 locations across Paris, Lyon, and Marseille. Over 25 staff members. Designers, editors, interns. People who believed in what we were doing. We weren't just a team, we were a family I built from scratch on my own terms. But I never boasted. I never brought it up at family dinners. I never emailed press clippings or framed my magazine covers for their walls. My mentor once told me, "Success is like fire, warm when kept quiet, dangerous when flaunted." He was right. Pride and silence kept me safe from their judgment, from their greed. And yet, even with all I had accomplished, a small part of me had always longed for recognition. Not applause, just acknowledgement. A simple "we're proud of you." But I didn't get that. And perhaps I never would. That night by the window, I didn't cry. I simply sat still, sipping my coffee, surrounded by the life I had built alone. And for the first time in a long while, I realized that was enough. 6 months after that Easter evening, my father called again. His voice was strained, quieter than usual, almost unfamiliar. Company was in trouble. Again. This time it was Julian. He had signed the wrong contract, misread a clause, overlooked a termination clause, something careless but costly. The mistake resulted in a loss of 120,000 euros. Now the business was on the verge of collapse, and with it, the Dubois name. He didn't demand this time. He pleaded. For the family, Arielle. For the Dubois reputation. Please help us. I sat in silence, letting his words hang in the air like smoke. Then I answered calmly. The 80,000 euros I gave before was more than enough. If you want help now, return that first. He didn't say another word. So I hung up. The next morning they came. All 3 of them, my father, my mother, and Julian, standing outside my door like ghosts from a past I no longer claimed. No call, no message. Just there. I didn't invite them in. I stepped out, shut the door behind me, and blocked the entrance with my body. If you're here to ask for 120,000 euros, turn around, I said coldly. I'm not helping. My mother's face twisted with emotion. Her voice trembled as she reached out to touch my arm, but I didn't move. Arielle, she said softly, you have a whole chain of studios now. 120,000 euros is nothing to you. If you don't help us, the company will collapse. Julian took a step forward. For once, his tone was subdued, almost human. I'm sorry, Arielle. I know I messed up. Please. Just this once. I looked at them, truly looked. The man who never believed in me. The woman who stood by in silence. The boy who took everything and still came back asking for more. I clenched the edge of the doorway tighter. Leave. Or I call the police. My mother opened her mouth again, desperation rising. But I cut her off, louder this time, my voice firm, final. I have nothing to do with you anymore. Company's collapse is the result of your favoritism and your silence. I'm not responsible for saving anyone. I turned and closed the door hard. I didn't wait to see their faces. I didn't care if they stood there for 5 more minutes or 5 more hours. They were no longer mine to carry. I began to grow suspicious when I realized my family somehow knew about all 5 of my studios. I had never told them, not once. I never posted office addresses or tagged locations on purpose. But perhaps they had stumbled upon my Instagram, where I shared snapshots of owls in moonlight, wolves in snow, and behind-the-scenes glimpses of my team. Maybe they'd seen the interviews. Maybe someone had bragged on my behalf. Either way, I suddenly understood that they had been watching, quietly, from a distance. And now that they were desperate, I feared they'd do what they always did, take. So I texted. No frills, no softness. If any of you harm my reputation or my work in any way, I will sue. This is not a bluff. Julian ignored it. The very next day, I woke up to a storm. He'd posted on his social media. A long, public post, complete with a picture of the three of them standing in front of my door, my building clearly visible in the background. Some people forget where they came from. When our family business was on the verge of collapse, we asked my sister, who owns several successful studios, for help. She slammed the door in our faces. Family meant nothing to her. We were just beggars to her now. Post went viral. Comments poured in. Ungrateful. Money changes people. Wow. What a monster. Hope her empire crashes like her empathy. Within days, my inbox was flooded. I lost 2 contracts, one with a wildlife conservation agency, another with a publishing house. One brand ambassador deal was put on hold until further review. Even my staff started asking questions. Some of them hadn't known the full story. They only saw the headlines, the whispers, the screenshots passed around online like poison. My stomach stayed clenched for a week. Sleep? Barely. Coffee became a crutch. I considered posting my side of the story, but I knew the internet doesn't reward nuance. It wants heroes or villains, and I refused to play either. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Claire Dubois, not my mother, but the lawyer who'd helped me sign the lease for my very first studio. I hadn't spoken to Claire in over 2 years, but her tone was exactly as I remembered, sharp, efficient, and somehow warm underneath it all. I explained everything: the malicious post, the wave of backlash, the deals lost, the financial loss. And most importantly, the receipts, the €80,000 transfer, the loan records, the texts begging for help. I had it all. Claire listened, took notes, and finally said, "Arielle, this is textbook defamation. You have every right to pursue damages. And I assure you, with the evidence you've got, this is a slam dunk." I let out a long, shaking breath. Then I want to go through with it. All the way. She nodded. Good. Let me handle everything. 3 months later, we were in court. Courtroom in Paris was colder than I expected, both in temperature and tone. Julian sat across from me, no longer the brother I remembered, but a pale version of him, thinner, tense, wrapped in a suit that didn't quite fit. His lawyer spoke first, trying to paint the post as an expression of grief and stress. It was personal, they said. An emotional reaction, not a calculated attack. But Claire was unflinching. She detailed everything: the timing of the post, the number of views, the clients lost, the reputational damage. She read out the messages I had received, some threatening, some mocking. She presented the financial reports showing how revenue had dropped in the aftermath. She played a screen recording of Julian's public replies to commenters, confirming details he could have only known through internal, private means. Then she dropped the final blow: the proof that I had lent them €80,000 in the past without a single repayment. Her voice rang out like a bell in the silent room. My client did not abandon her family. She was taken advantage of. And when she set a boundary, she was vilified. What Mr. Dubois did was not emotional, it was calculated defamation, and it had consequences. The judge took only 2 days to rule. Julian was found guilty of defamation and ordered to pay me €200,000 in damages. The look on his face when the verdict was read was something I'll never forget. It wasn't just shock, it was humiliation. For once, someone other than me had held him accountable. To pay the judgment, he had to sell the family company. Their last asset. The same business I was once denied a part in, the one my parents poured their pride into. He also sold his apartment. Word got around that he'd moved back in with our parents, 3 disgraced Du Bois under one roof. And me? I went home. I took off my coat, sat by the window with a cup of tea, and stared out into the Paris sky. Clouds moved lazily across the rooftops. Somewhere a bird sang. Life didn't suddenly become easier, but it became cleaner. There's a strange kind of peace that comes after finally standing up for yourself. After years of swallowing disrespect, pretending silence was strength, I had spoken and the world hadn't ended. In fact, it had started to rebuild itself around me, brick by brick, with stronger boundaries and clearer light. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel smug. Just free. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night. 6 months later, my mother showed up at my doorstep on a rainy morning. Her coat was soaked through, her once carefully styled hair clinging to her forehead in limp strands. She clutched the frayed straps of a worn fabric bag like it was the only thing holding her together. Her voice trembled, not from the cold, but from what she was about to say. "Your father's in the hospital. He needs surgery. 20,000 euros, she whispered. I know I was wrong. But please, just this once. I looked at her, no longer the formidable, sharp-tongued woman who used to command every dinner conversation. What stood before me was a mother stripped of pride, afraid, and desperate. But instead of anger, I felt a strange, hollow numbness. "To me," I said quietly, firmly, "you and father died the day you let Julian destroy my career and said nothing. I don't give money to the dead." There was no yelling, no tears. Just the soft click of the door closing behind me. Till something gnawed at me. The next day, I went to the hospital myself to verify the story. It was true. My father was there, and the operation was real. The urgency wasn't a lie. But then I found something else. They still owned the villa in the suburbs. A property worth over 400,000 euros, unmortgaged, untouched, fully in their name. I texted my mother, "Sell the house. Use that money to pay for his surgery." She didn't reply. Maybe because the house was always meant for Julian. Maybe because she still didn't believe I'd truly say no. But I didn't care anymore. They had their choices. And I had mine. I'm not telling this story to spark anger or sadness. I'm telling it because I know someone out there might be where I once was, treated like a backup plan by their own family, valued only for their success, not for who they are. And if that's you, hear me clearly. You are not selfish for saying no to being used. Sometimes kindness needs boundaries. And love, especially one-sided love, needs to be released. I still believe in family. But now I understand that family isn't just where you come from, it's where you feel you truly belong. My team, my closest friends, the people who've stood by me without expectations, they are my real family now. I've asked myself many times, was I wrong for walking away from a family that always saw me as second best? Was I too harsh for refusing to help those who turned their backs on me when I needed them the most? And every time the answer becomes clearer, no. I wasn't wrong. I was finally right to protect myself. If this story resonates with you, I hope you'll take away these 5 lessons I had to learn the hard way. You are not responsible for saving people who repeatedly hurt you. Loyalty means nothing if it only flows one way. Success doesn't mean you owe your family a blank check. Walking away is painful, but sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do for yourself. Family is not defined by blood, but by how people treat you when you have nothing to offer. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've gone through something similar, please share your experience. I'd love to know how you made it through. Your voice might be the light someone else needs right now. And if this story spoke to you, like it, share it, and hit subscribe. because someone out there may need to hear exactly this, exactly today.